Welcome to Common Sense. I'm John.
And I'm Ed. How are you, John?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm good. Aside from the Pats, we won't talk too much about that. But we are joined by another Pats fan, and I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have today. We're joined by John Panaccione. You see John on the screen here. He's with LogicBay. I've known John in a lot of different roles. First, as a SaaS CEO and entrepreneur. He's got a background in online learning, and today he is the CEO of LogicBay, a company that's a PRM or partner relationship management software provider. They're a SaaS company. They focus on industrial companies, and their clients include names that you'll certainly recognize like Caterpillar and Hyster-Yale. I've also known John through the HubSpot world, where I think John McTighe and John Panaccione also connected. And he's been a kind of a big thinker about inbound marketing for a long time. And in fact, has incorporated HubSpot into some of the stuff that they're doing, not only their own marketing at LogicBay, but their partner stack that they've built. Also, as a veteran, John and I were in the 82nd Airborne at the same time, although we didn't know each other then. But he's one of those guys as a tanker. They used to push those Sheridans out the back of planes or lapse them in or whatever, and then jump out the door and follow them. So he spent time under canopy and understands that world and is active in encouraging veteran entrepreneurs. He helped start a program, one of the co-founders of a program called Vet to CEO, and he's launched a crowdfunding program in North Carolina that's also focusing on vets to some extent. And as I said, perhaps the most important point in the introduction, he's also a Patriots fan. So great to have you here today, John. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, John, for having me.
And thanks for your service, man. Appreciate it. Both of you.
You're welcome. So among all of those areas of expertise, the one that we're really going to draw on today is John's deep understanding of industrial sales channel. And the idea of this conversation, part of the reason he's the featured guest for this is because he kind of gave me the idea, pulled on this thread or poked me to read a book. He recommended the book, The Effortless Experience, that's written by Dixon, Toman, and DeLisi. I think some of those were part of the original team that wrote the Challenger Sale for CEB. And it's a really interesting dive into, the way we think about customer experience and customer service. And so I'll shut up and let's just start with that, John. Give us a quick recap of how you found it, what you thought when you first read it, and kind of what your reaction is in terms of what it really means about customer experience.
You know, Ed, it's one of those books I think I shared with you. You know, you read like once a year and it kind of hits you on the side of the head like, why didn't I think of that? Of course, that's it. And like it kind of makes things that are swirling around our heads very clear. And this is one of those books. You know, you think about your own experiences researching products, trying to buy things both on your personal life and in business. And some of the elements in this book around self-service really hit home. And some of the analogies made really hit home. And, it's one of those books. It's a once-a-year book that I always have one every year. And the year was almost out, actually, but it did hit me. And it changed the way I think about even running LogicBay and some things we're doing today with LogicBay and our own sales and marketing efforts.
John, I think that you and I talked about it, and you grabbed a copy and read it. What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's a transformative book too. And, customer experience is the thing now. Everybody's talking about it. Very few people are doing anything about it. So it's a good time to get your feet wet, and start to really try to understand what it means. I mean, it's been around forever, but have we ever really kind of put together all of our digital efforts into customer experience, aligning departments and all that kind of good stuff, including sales channel? So I think that's one of the topics I'd like to hear about today, because it's the next thing if it's not right now.
Absolutely. And I guess for context, for people that are listening that haven't read the book, number one, obviously all three of us recommend that you get it. But number two, the premise of it, through the name, as is indicated by the name, Effortless Experience, is really that instead of these tales of heroic customer service where a company just completely makes a mess of it, but then some superstar steps up and really does a fabulous job, with a great story to tell about how they fixed it, that doesn't really help build loyalty. what builds loyalty is people understand there's going to be hiccups. And so how easy is it to overcome the hiccup? How transparent is the service in the background? How little effort do they have to put into their experience with the company? And that can be measured in ways like channel switching. If they try to start with an online chat and then have to go to a phone call and then have to submit a form to send in details of what they're talking about, each of those changes requires additional effort. And there's fascinating research in the book that correlates loyalty to effort. The more effort, the lower the loyalty. So that's really what the book's about. So let's start to dive into that point of channel. And in the industrial space that John McTighe and I talk about frequently, and where John Panaccione's company really focuses, sales channel is really active. Certainly is in the tech world too, but the channel looks a little bit different. But John Panaccione, you've really got two perspectives. First, as a company with your own prospects and customers that has incorporated the inbound experience into your revenue growth approach. But then you've also got this role where you're an observer of companies that are selling through channel. And so let's kind of start with that. I mean, you understand from everything that you do as a company to sell about kind of how to, the importance of this effortless experience and some of what you can do to try to create it. But when you introduce indirect sales channel, as many of your clients have, that starts to just naturally introduce some barriers. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think we're in a unique position where we have to practice what we preach at LogicBay. We've been around 15 years and have partners as well. So we actually experience some of the things we help our customers with, and that's a blessing and a curse sometimes. But just to give you, starting with ourselves and having read the book, one of the things we were frustrated about, we drank the Kool-Aid on inbound years ago, and just in the last year, we've tripled our volume of traffic to our website, which I'm really proud of. That's the good news. The frustrating thing was the conversion rates were actually going down a little, and it was a bit alarming. On one hand, we had through the roof traffic to the site, but our conversion rates started not to at least even keep track, I must say, and we were puzzled as to why. And, I think it's evidence of some of this behavioral change in the market where people are looking for self-service options, and they are, if they don't see them, they go away. And we had data that was beginning to tell us that was happening even on our own, marketing efforts. And that same experience of looking at data to tell you what the behavior is in our marketing activities is really profound for us, but also for our customers with the tools that we provide to them. They're getting the same data, and we encourage our customers in manufacturing to look at the data coming in from marketing efforts, and what story is that data telling, and does that story and the data behind it support the theory that people are increasingly looking for self-serve options or not? And the beauty with a lot of the tools we have today is you can get away from hunches and use real objective data to help guide your experiments and see if your theories are true or not over time.
So what kind of data are you pointing people to? I mean, no company stands up and says, we don't care about customers, we don't care about the experience. Everyone says, oh, it's really important, we're focused that way, we build a great experience, but then so many actually build something that's very different than that. So what data do you lay in front of them to point that dissonance out?
Well, it's a combination of different data sources. So one is, primary data where they may or may not have it actually, but let's just assume they have primary data from their marketing tools that measures traffic and conversion rates and behavior on site. So you can use that lattice of information to determine what have the trends been over the last year, just like our own trends, where traffic went up, but conversion rates actually faltered on a percentage basis. That tells us something's wrong. And so we look at the same thing in our customer base. The second set of data is like data that's in the book. At a macro level, what's going on in all industries in terms of what's happening out there in terms of buyer behavior, both on the B2B side and the B2C side. And, the book's a great example of some organizations that take a lot of that third-party research and condense it down into something understandable. So when you correlate what's going on across industries with that third-party data, with what's going on in your own shop, so to speak, in your own own company with the data you do have, you can then begin to see, is our data trending with what this third-party data is telling us? And if it is, then you should start running some experiments. Not to get too ahead of ourselves here, but the easy thing to do is just start running small experiments.
Yep.
And to make some small adjustments to see if any indicators start to improve based on small experiments, and then just keep reinforcing and expanding on those experiments to test your theories.
So John McTighe, you follow a lot of this stuff really closely, and that situation that John Panaccione described of increasing traffic but decreasing conversion rates sounds like something I've heard a lot of different places. What does that match your impression of what's happening across the board?
The rumors out there are that inbound is over. A lot of people say that kind of thing for that reason, because you're getting in a lot, maybe you're getting in a lot more traffic and you're getting even more leads, but they're not relevant leads. They don't stick around. They don't become your customers. And they may even detract from your overall strategy. So people are looking at other things like account-based marketing and just really overall engagement. How do you find the right people out of that big volume of traffic that's coming in and leads that are coming in, and then engage with them in a way that they want to be engaged with? What do your customers and visitors really want? What are they looking for? How do they find it? How easy is it to find? Those are things that you want to, those are the friction things that you want to reduce. So it's a combination of asking questions like that, and then actually setting up small experiments, like John said, to see how well those things work. For example, a conversational marketing tool, and see how well people engage with something like that.
So that's a great point. That's, being one of your real passions, the technology behind digital marketing. We all see there's often an inclination to kind of grab the shiny new object, whether it's something on the website or, an app that lets you open the PDF without a form and puts the form in the middle of it, or this buzz about conversational marketing and chatbots, or using knowledge bases to facilitate interactions. How do you balance? And John, you're John Panaccione running a software company, and you kind of experience it or see it from two sides. So how do you balance productive, interesting, helpful new tools against, really solving for the experience as opposed to grabbing technology? And how do you find the balance between those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a double-edged sword. Being in a technology company, my own for 15 years, and prior to that in my career, I've always been paranoid about the reality of software companies, that you perfect the software over time for yesterday's problem or yesterday's buyer. So we're always paranoid that we're evolving our technology to meet tomorrow's buyer or tomorrow's customer, and that's a paranoia I think every company has to have. But sadly, few companies have the agility to make those moves when they need to make it. The book talks about a great example of when we fly. We go to the airport. My own preference is I look for that kiosk. I want to go to that kiosk. If I haven't printed out my ticket already or have it even on my phone, I don't even have to go to the kiosk these days. And just use self-service to check myself in. I don't even think about going to the counter. And the equivalent of that those are airlines doing that, right? So the equivalent, if we are serving anyone in any industry, is what is that next piece of technology solution that's going to make your customers more satisfied and much more loyal to you because you've introduced that technology. So I don't care what industry you're in. We happen to deal in manufacturing, but as those behaviors change with the end customers, we have to have the agility to keep pace with those changes. I don't know if I answered your question, but just some reactions I had.
I think you're absolutely right. And we're programmed that way by our own consumer behavior. We all go to Amazon and we order what we want and it shows up the next day. I remember waiting weeks for things, and not getting what I wanted and having to get on the phone and exchange something. All of that's changed now, right? So people expect that in B2B as well.
But how do you evaluate when there's a neat new piece of technology that you think helps simplify that customer experience? What sort of a process do you have? How do you make the decision? Are we going to try it? How do you make the decision about how you'll test it or pilot it? And then how do you make a decision about broad implementation?
Well, I'll take a shot at that. I've learned the hard way not to chase hunches. If you can't measure it, you're wasting your time. So and that's my opinion. So, you have to have something where you've got good data coming out of these experiments that may, more so than anything, allow you to follow your hunch, right? If you have a hunch about something, I'll give you an example, one that we're dealing with right now. My hunch is that email is becoming less effective as a way to deal with prospects and customers. We've implemented Office 365, and it does a masterful job filtering about 75% of the emails I don't even want to see. I never even see them. So I often wonder how many of our emails are falling victim to the same high tech, capability technology Office 365 users have. So that's my hunch. Now I need data to prove that. So how can we prove that? Well, we can use things like conversational bots and chat on our website to see, and other techniques like that to say, do our engagement levels go up? Do we get more measurable leads out of different interactions we do by spending time and resources on those experiments? And we can compare that to what kind of results we're getting, like from email conversions, right? And those are measurable ways to test different ways of things. And instead of just blindly following a hunch, putting measurements behind it to track, to prove or disprove those hunches.
So I think there's some interesting stuff in there about actually designing a thoughtful test. So it may even be more than just what's our engagement rate with email versus chat. But for instance, one of the benefits of chatbots in some cases is that you can shorten that process from the interaction to a meeting. You can get your sales rep booking a meeting immediately. And so that's like a hybrid. And so you have to design the experiment properly to think of those as opposed to just the engagement rate. As a MarTech Whisperer, anything else to add to this topic, John?
Well, I think the other thing you need to do is find out what your customers actually want. And you can examine their behavior and you can measure it, but you might still not be reaching the mark. So it's really a good idea to ask, even as simple as having lunch with somebody and asking them what works and what doesn't work. Old fashioned still works too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk more about channel. I mean, as hard as this is, the book does a great job talking about how, for what ought to be a simple idea, it's really hard to do and do right and do at scale. For as hard as it is to do if you're working directly with customers, then as soon as you interpose a third party, indirect sales channel in between, that's got other personalities, other business processes, other business systems, other business philosophy, not necessarily aligned goals and all those kinds of things, it gets even that much harder. So this is really the heart of what you do, John Panaccione. Talk about that, about how you can try to create this effortless experience even through an indirect channel.
Yeah, I think what gravitated me to channels is, our paratrooper past, we're used to chaos and insanity constantly and being outnumbered against all odds. So all of that stuff is really what a channel's all about. A channel's an ecosystem of independently owned organizations that all have really the same goal. They all want to make money selling and servicing a product. But how they go about doing that all along the way has very different motivations, has turnover of personnel, and you have this constant fluid thing called a channel that's not only fluid in and of itself, but the market around it is fluid. So the buying behavior of their customers. So it's a really chaotic, never-ending environment where you've got to manage through that for everyone to be successful. And what I have found through experience is there's one thing that gets everyone's attention, and those are sales leads and sales and satisfied customers. It tends to keep everyone honest. And if we can get mission aligned, so to speak, across the ecosystem that is the channel around those things, that typically keeps people grounded on common goals and makes the channel successful. And in this day and age, the most valuable currency out there other than keeping an existing customer, is finding a new one and leads. And how do you develop leads? And leads have a shelf life, as you know, and it's getting shorter and shorter. So how do you get a lead from interested to in a sales conversation as efficiently as possible? And by having everyone in the channel aligned around how to do that well, you can find common ground. And I will tell you, once you find that, I think the greatest challenge has nothing to do with technology these days, and it's all around change management. You know, as B2B buying trends of creating these changes we're talking about, managing the change process within the channel has nothing to do with technology. Oftentimes has a lot to do with communication and being clear and setting ground rules and having playbooks and things like that. But that oftentimes gets, shorted. It's all, people get enamored with technology, where you got to have that change management component as well. So we're seeing that over and over as well. So to answer your question, I think common currency around generating sales and leads and sharing those for the better of the whole of the channel, and managing change constantly in the channel through change management techniques is key to success.
And so how does PRM do that if we know that our ultimate goal is we want to grow revenue, but we want to create a great experience for the customer?
Yeah, good question. So it's having a seamless end-to-end experience, starting with a lead being generated on an inbound lead process within the technology infrastructure around PRM. And then once that lead's created, however that's created, through techniques that get more conversational or emails or whatever, there's a shelf life to that lead, and it's shorter and shorter. So now being able to triage that lead and do something with it that's the best thing to do for that lead and for the channel as a whole becomes important. For example,
let me just interrupt for a second. You're suggesting that in most cases the leads are going to be generated by the manufacturer, right?
Well, we're seeing that more and more. There's data to support that from multiple sources as well. That people that get put on buying groups, there's no more, take a guy or gal out for a golf outing and you get the deal anymore. I think those days are gone. I don't even have time to do that. But, buying groups are being formed, and there are people using the internet as a primary tool to whittle down options before they even engage with a prospective supplier. I'm preaching to the choir here, but when you're in that environment, that you do have to do things very differently. And yes, the manufacturer oftentimes is viewed as the source of the latest and greatest information by that researching buyer, and they'll bypass the channel partners seeking that information.
So I interrupted you. You were getting ready to talk about how PRM can take those leads and facilitate that process, move them quickly, and create that experience for the buyer while also helping the channel.
Yeah, so I don't want to mention names, but some pretty well-known companies, if you go to their corporate websites, they're still brochureware, like from the 80s and 90s. There's not much information there. There's not much research, and yet the manufacturer is the one doing all the R&D, doing all the great stuff that's developing tomorrow's products that can really impact their end customers' lives and then businesses down the road. But that information's trapped in this thing at the manufacturer level, where, because historically the role was that the partners were the ones with the shiny brochures and went out and educated potential customers in their market. But if those potential customers or future customers are doing research and wanting to get the latest and greatest information to solve problems for them, like I said a minute ago, they're going to go to manufacturer. We would all probably do that on this call today. And we want the best information possible. And when there's a huge disconnect between many older manufacturers who are used to the old way of selling through channels and what they have to offer that researching buying group and what's required today.
But in some cases, the channel may recognize this and be more sophisticated than the manufacturer, right? So, I mean, is it possible for certain forward-looking channel to almost just kind of seize control of that and create the customer experience and figure out how to buffer the older attitude of the manufacturer?
Yeah, yes is the short answer. So I have found that the least complicated and expensive the product is, the more you can push that thing to the edge in the channel and rely on the channel partners to sell and service that product. That's why a lot in the IT industry, that pretty much still is the model out there. When you get into other industries, medical devices, heavy equipment, where the products are getting more expensive, they're harder to sell and harder to fix, the value propositions are wildly different. It's very difficult to get all the channel partners to reach a an even amount or a comparable amount of competencies to do all the things you need to do around inbound techniques at an investment level that makes sense when you look at it at the whole, right? It's hard to do, as you know, right? It's hard to do right. So if you're trying to do it right for the good of all the channel partners, isn't it best done right once, the manufacturer level, for the benefit of all the channel partners? And there's one great model for this, and that's the franchise industry. You know,
Yeah.
franchise industry, the franchisor does all the marketing, right? Think about pizza franchises and things, right? For the benefit of the franchisees. Well, it's not that it's anything new, but today, you know, manufacturers can think the same way and use the internet effectively to replicate the same type of model.
But I'll push back a little bit. So if you look at retail, the middleman's being pushed out. Basically, we're all going to Amazon just to buy everything. And you could argue that they're the middleman, but, you know, there aren't any stores anymore, you know. So is that same kind of dynamic going on in the industrial space? So if I want a Caterpillar tractor, I'll go straight to Caterpillar and try to buy one online. I mean, is that eventually going to take over?
No, good question. I think there's a huge difference between the Amazon model, so to speak, and the retail e-commerce space when you're buying commoditized items. Like if I'm buying the book that we're mentioning today, likely that some people watching this might go to Amazon and pick up that book, right? I'm not talking about that. The role of the channel partner still is very, very critical. They still control the sales process. But if I work for a major big box home improvement company and I'm looking for a fleet of lift trucks for my unloading docks in all my stores, and I'm on a buying group, and I happen to live in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm in the buying group, I'm probably just going to use the internet to see what kind of material handling companies are out there and what's the latest and greatest they have for the application I'm looking for. That's the difference. But when the short list gets created and you know, they get invited to the table, absolutely the channel partners play a very critical role in that last mile of the sales process. But the lead, I believe, and data shows that this is the case, is created by that researching buyer, no matter where they're located, and usually going to the manufacturer initially.
And to your point, John McTighe, there's some really interesting research around traditional middlemen, or this topic of disintermediation. And you look at certain industries, the travel industry was held up as a perfect case of where disintermediation was going to happen. I mean, who needed a travel agent if you could just go directly to, you know, maybe a third-party website like Travelocity or directly to the carrier and book your travel? What's fascinating, though, is that the travel agent industry is growing in employment, it's growing in revenue. The fastest group of travel agent customers these days are millennials. They're 3 times as likely to book travel through a travel agent as boomers. And so where we went almost to the point of complete elimination of middlemen in the travel business, now actually we've come full circle. And so what's driving that? I think back to the thing that you and John have both been talking about, the buyer. You've been hammering on it, John McTighe. Ask the buyer what they want. And some travel agents have figured out what these millennial buyers want, and they're delivering it. It's insights. I think, you know, the common theme, particularly in the industrial space, help somebody understand the outcome. How are you going to help them improve their business? How their business will look different, how they'll look more, how they'll earn more, save more, make more, whatever the case may be. It's a fascinating discussion, really.
Yeah.
A lot of what we've been talking about has been prospects. Now, John McTighe, you're always talking about the importance of customers and marketing to customers. You've been doing a lot of work and research lately into buying journey. And I know that part of a huge function of channel that John Panaccione helps companies deal with is ongoing service, taking care of equipment that people have bought. And so those are both kind of angles of the customer experience, not just that buying or prospect experience, but marketing to customers, customer experience. Let's talk about that some.
Yeah, and I just would add to that I think the, you know, it's the value chain that we're really looking at. You know, what do the customers really want, and what value do channel partners bring to the table? And I'm sure a lot of that is sales, but a lot of that also is service after the fact, and retention and upsells and cross sells and all that good stuff. So John, does your stuff cover that aspect of the customer journey?
Oh yeah, I mean customer support, specifically in manufacturing, service technician readiness and planning and quality and warranty work and all those things. Post-purchase support is a big part of what we support as well. And again, that's a whole different realm around service. But again, it gets down to a lot of the answer to that question is data, right? So where does data reside that's actionable, and what do you do with that data? A couple of examples. One is data around, machine performance. So a lot of times that's done at the manufacturer, got satellite systems monitoring machines, predicting downtime, but that information and data needs to get to the local dealer who can service that piece of equipment before it goes down. So those have been wholesale changes in roles in the use of data and how products are supported post-purchase like that. And something a little bit more, easier to understand is best practices. So if there's a trend in all the warranty information that there's a certain fault occurring in the field across the same product that was unexpected, right? Somebody figures out how to fix that thing or prevent the thing from breaking, it becomes a best practice. How do you get that best practice across all dealers that, support the customer post purchase worldwide? Becomes a challenge as well. So there's a holistic change as a result of technology and the ubiquitous nature of it and data around products that have caused change over the last 20 years. And I don't see that slowing down.
Yeah, and things like IoT and AI, add to that whole effortless experience, right?
Absolutely.
But so here's an interesting question, comparing that direct experience with the channel experience. In that scenario you described, John P., where somebody comes up with a new best practice for how to prevent or fix a problem, part of it is pushing that information out through the channel so that they can perhaps proactively or preemptively address it. But part of it also ought to be proactively pushing it out to the end users so that they're aware of it and they recognize it and they can take preemptive steps or bring the channel in. And so that becomes an interesting example. If you're going to make that experience effortless, how do you provide that information both to the channel but also to the end user, and in each case in a in a form or via a tool that is comfortable for their role, their personality. The maintenance manager working third shift in the bowels of a factory is going to access information differently than the president of the sales channel and the IT director of the manufacturer. And how do you account for all of that? I think it goes back to what both of you said earlier, ask the buyer. But John P., I guess a question for you. I know you do a lot of work with your clients, helping them understand their buyers and helping them create structures and best practices for the channel. So how would you go about having those conversations and collecting that information and reconciling the very different preferences for channel access of information, et cetera?
Yeah, we have a very formal process for doing that. It's a 5-part process I won't bore you with, but one of the steps is a dealer survey, both on a quantitative survey basis where you're getting a lot of data coming back from a survey, but also qualitative interviews as well to supplement that. So we have a formal process for doing that. It's part of a 5-step methodology we have. But I would, based on what you just said, Ed, add to what you said. Part of the answer is redefining what we mean by a channel. I'm not going to pick on you because I use the same language, but when we say channel, right, we always say and the end user, right? And we don't even say supplier, right? So if we redefine what a channel is, and the channel starts with the end user, stops at the channel partners, then you have the manufacturer, then you have the supplier. If that's our channel now, we really think differently about how to maximize the user experience and quality across the channel and expand the definition of channel, because really that's what we ought to do. And a lot of work and research and talk that's going on in manufacturing around Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing is what this is all about. It's the next 4th generation of manufacturing. But if you buy into that, you got to expand your definition of the channel and think differently about who you're supporting.
That's
John
what
McTighe, that sounds like the continuum we talk about.
Yeah, it's very much like sales and marketing and customer service all being in a flywheel sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we all have inbound marketing kind of in our blood as part of how we think about growing business. Sometimes, though, it strikes me that maybe, we're still talking from an old playbook, and maybe that gets in the way. Are there ways that the traditional mentality about inbound marketing actually complicates the customer experience? I mean, one I think of is forms. Forms are obnoxious. 5 years ago, nobody cared. They'd fill them out. It wasn't a big deal. And now people tend to reject them. So we could debate forms, or, you gentlemen may have other examples. But how does inbound marketing or that mentality get in the way sometimes of the effortless experience?
John, why don't you go first?
Go first, John. I have a more strongest opinion than you, probably.
I guess we've all been around long enough. We're all kind of tainted by some of this stuff. But, one of my things that I live by is the saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think what happens, like I said earlier, with software companies, you get this subsector of software companies, and PRM is not exempt from this, by the way, but I don't care what category you pick. And tools get developed that become very, very good, right? For example, email marketing tools. So they get very, very good and very, very sophisticated. But the problem is the market moves, and now they're, like I said earlier, you have to question whether that's your best tactic anymore. So oftentimes the market's 1 or 2 steps ahead from the tool sets that are out there that everybody's invested in, and there's a lag between the market moving and marketers' ability to move with it. And a lot of that has to do with technology and tools, and realizing that you need new tools to move with the market. So, I don't know if that, as inbound marketers, I think what has to guide our decisions these days and what tools we invest in and what processes we put in place has to be, how do we deal with the researching buyer that wants to move at their own pace and along a path that they want to take, which channel they want to take to engage with us. And how do you develop this marketing apparatus that allows for that and allows for differences instead of being a one-trick pony and treating every prospect as wanting the same thing that we expect. And oftentimes that same thing that we expect is all the stuff we've invested in, right? So if we have 15 different workflows, all predominantly relying on email as the vehicle, is that the right thing anymore? Because we love email, right? And we need to move away from that, for example.
So I want to circle back and I want to let you talk about the stack here in a second, because that's an interesting point. But I want to hear John McTighe's opinions on how the inbound marketing mentality may get in the way of that customer experience.
Well, I think pretty much across the board, if you ask somebody what they want, they're going to say they want a conversation. They just want a one-to-one. They want to get personalized. They want to ask a question and get an answer right away, just like in B2C. And that's kind of all you need to know. So inbound marketing doesn't do that. It speaks like one person speaking to the world is inbound and hoping somebody answers. And that's not going to work anymore, not for what people really want. So you have to make the effortless experience a reality across the board on the website, email, everywhere else. You have to just eliminate the friction between someone who knows what they're talking about and someone who's asking a question. And that's a big challenge, but technology is already way down that path, so I think we just need to think that way in our strategies.
But probably the key word there is we need to think. I mean, the world isn't binary. We think email's good or email's bad. Inbound marketing is good or bad. Outbound prospecting is good or bad. And it's a multivariate, complicated, constantly evolving market, as you said, John Panaccione, which means we have to evolve. But to your point about the tech stack getting outdated, and I know certainly John McTighe, with his background in tech and the project that you guys have done at LogicBay, building your partner stack, that's probably a good place for us to wrap up, to talk about that a little bit, let people know kind of the premise of that, how you're doing it, and then, just take a couple minutes and let folks know more about your crowdfunding or partner stack or how to reach you if they've got different things they want to talk about.
Yeah, so we have two iterations of our product. We call the first one, and the one relevant to today, is Channel Stack. So, and I'll get into that. And then the other one is Funding Stack. So we're into this crowdfunding sector as well. But I've learned. Forrester Research just came out with an interesting finding. The number of independently owned software vendors has gone up tenfold in the last 10 years. And expected to go up tenfold again in the next 10 years. And the reason I bring that up is it's way too easy to start a software company. There's a gazillion of them, particularly in the sales and marketing space. We've all seen that eye chart with like thousands of icons on there someone puts out every year.
Yep.
It's very confusing when you walk an expo floor at a software convention, or just go to Salesforce's, and it's mind-boggling as you walk on the expo floor at all the options out there. If you're a marketer, particularly in manufacturing, and your job is to support channel partners and the end users and everything we've been talking about today, where do you start? And what we've done as a company is we've kind of picked best of breed applications and said, you need this toolbox, you need a wrench, you need a hammer, you need a level, you need these things these tools you need to manage an effective channel. So in effect, we've pre-assembled them as a stack of software that already is integrated and works well together, and you can buy it today. So that's kind of our value proposition. Without sounding like an ad, I want to make this point, that there isn't one single software company, Salesforce.com included, because they have this thing called an app exchange that has all these bolt-on applications that you need. There's no one company that does it all these days. And it used to be in the 80s, you might do SAP or something like that. But in the channel, there's so many options, it's confusing. I think you're going to see companies like us kind of pre-assemble solutions using best-of-breed technologies that offer a channel manager or somebody responsible with that, something they can use today without having to go through the buying cycle for each one of those pieces and assemble it together. So that's what we're doing. We've done that. We call it Channel Stack. And I don't think we're alone. I think you'll see that be the trend in the software space going forward.
I do too.
Yeah, John, that's an area of specialty of yours. That matches what you've seen across the market.
Yeah, I think that's what's left. Like John said, I mean, it's such a tidal wave of possibilities that you can't possibly consume it or even understand it. So having value-added partners that can do that for you is going to be really valuable, and it already is. So, and it's going to depend on what your needs are. So it's not just sort of a generalized, it's not like a marketplace that you can just fit things together, because you still have to understand what they do and how to use them best and how to support them and all that. So even if you can connect up pieces, you're not there yet. You need something that actually does the job.
All right, so John P., this has been a great conversation. Before we stop, why don't you just lay out for people how they can follow you, find you, connect with you, learn more about what you guys do, whatever.
Yeah, basically we're on Twitter and LinkedIn primarily, and our website's got a host of information about everything we've talked about today, including a resource page that has tons of blog articles, webinars, and white papers and things like that. I do want to add one more thing, if I may, Ed.
Sure.
That's a prediction.
All right.
Are we coming full circle back to the Patriots?
No. The Patriots will win the Super Bowl. No, might have to edit that piece out. But I think the industry, at least the one I'm in, anything related to software related to marketing and sales, in my opinion, is going to evolve to results-based. And the analogy I like to use is Uber, right? Everybody can relate to Uber. Imagine if Uber, when they came out, charged $2 a month for their app. And that was their positioning, that they were a software company, and if you buy their app, you can find rides, right? That's not what they did. We all know what they did. They gave the app away for free because people were amazed at how the app worked, and they get a ride and they pay for the ride. And just that simple analogy of using software to enable a disruptive interaction between a buyer and a seller has caused Uber to become a verb, right? The Uberization of things. So I think folks that manage software and use software in channels in particular relevant to today's conversation, people that sell that stuff have to change the way they sell it and tie their fees to results. And we started to do that at LogicBay too. We don't even charge for software in some cases. I'm not interested in selling software. I'm interested in our customers being successful. We'll use our software to make you successful. And if we're successful with you, then you pay us. I think that's going to become a mega trend in the technology space as we go forward.
So it sounds like we need to reconvene and talk about that. You're teasing us at the end with this prediction. I think it's a fascinating topic.
No, it has to be. And then other industries have done it. And, you know, there's just too much choice out there. And people don't know who to invest in because they have for every one LogicBay, there's 9 other possible choices. And who do you place your bets with, right? Well, those companies that truly can deliver, I think, are going to put their reputation and their fees on the line, and they should if they can really believe what they're selling, and then get paid for business results occurring. So I think that's what's going to be happening over the next 5 years or so.
Cool. So logicbay.com, just like the logo that we see on the wall behind you, right?
Yep, that's it.
John McTighe, anything to wrap up with?
No, it's been very interesting, John, and appreciate having you on today, and good luck with everything, especially
Thanks for
the
having me.
Patriots.
Yeah, I want to have that next conversation. I want to figure out how we account for the fact that some companies can sell and some can't, if we're talking about making it outcomes. So thank you very much for joining us, John. It's been great to chat, and appreciate everyone that stopped by to watch today.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, take care.